let's get right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a 6-hour psychological thriller from 1974 that pushed human nature to its absolute breaking point. We're talking about a watershed moment in performance art, a piece that totally shocked the world and, honestly, still holds up a terrifying mirror to society today.
Picture this. You stroll into a gallery in Naples, Italy. The year is 1974. But you're not there to just politely stare at a painting. Instead, you're hit with a deeply unsettling question. You are no longer just a passive viewer. Suddenly, you're an active participant, and the artwork's final outcome, it's completely in your hands.
And that brings us to this incredibly chilling contract that Marina Abramović presented to the crowd. By explicitly declaring, "I am the object," she totally stripped away her own agency. She intentionally made herself completely passive, dumping the entire moral weight and the literal physical consequences squarely onto the viewers. It was a wild hypothesis. What do people actually do when all the rules are thrown out the window?
By putting these instructions in writing, she essentially created a formal protocol of engagement. It wasn't just some unspoken vibe. It was a written permission slip that stripped away everyday social constraints. She was literally inviting the audience to use any of these 72 objects on her body, however they wanted.
And here's where things get truly terrifying. Just look at the stark contrast of these 72 items. You've got instruments of delicate pleasure, like a feather, perfume, and honey. But sitting right next to them, tools of brutal, lethal violence. A metal bar, razor blades, and, get this, a loaded gun with a single bullet. She cranked the stakes to life or death immediately, putting both pleasure and immense pain right there on the table. Now, the whole thing was bound by a strict ticking clock. Abramović explicitly locked in a 6-hour window, running from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. According to the sources, this specific time frame acted as a bizarre guarantee that the audience wouldn't face legal consequences for their actions during those hours. It was essentially a temporary 6-hour suspension of law and order. Just look at how fast things deteriorate here. It's a genuinely horrifying descent. In the first hour, people were actually pretty gentle. They fed her cake, they gave her flowers, but once they realized she literally wasn't going to react, all those social inhibitions just melted away. By hour 3, major taboos were broken. They were slicing her clothes off. By hour 4, the physical assault started, cutting her skin, sticking rose thorns into her stomach. And then, in the 6th hour, the tension hit a lethal peak. Someone actually placed the loaded gun in her hand and pointed it right at her head, triggering a massive fight among the audience members. Finally, at 2 a.m., those agonizing 6 hours came to an end. The gallery director announced time was up. And in an absolute fraction of a second, the entire dynamic of that room violently shifted. The contrast here is just staggering. For 6 straight hours, she had been this passive object, enduring unimaginable physical and psychological abuse without shedding a single tear or fighting back. But the very second her time as an object expired, her humanity came rushing back. She was an active, breathing, conscious person again, and she started walking directly toward the exact people who had just spent hours tormenting her.
Faced with the sudden undeniable reality of the human being they had just violently abused, the audience just broke. The sources note that they subconsciously and quite literally fled the gallery. They ran out into the night, absolutely terrified of reprisal, totally unable to look the person they had just treated as a disposable thing in the eye.
Abramović's own conclusion from that night is just chilling. She later said, "What I learned was that if you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you." It is a devastating realization about the kind of cruelty ordinary, everyday people are capable of when handed absolute unchecked power over somebody else. The physical toll was massive, too. When she finally got back to her hotel room and looked in the mirror, she found that a patch of her hair had turned completely white overnight. The sheer terror of that experience literally altered her physical appearance, and she still carries the physical scars from those razor blades today.
Section 1. Power, objectification, and vulnerability.
So to really grasp the philosophical weight of this event, we need to step back and analyze the lessons left in its wake. Scholars studying the aftermath realized this wasn't just some sensationalized horror stunt. It was a deeply revealing empirical study of human psychology, exposing the invisible societal structures that keep our darkest urges in check. Take philosopher Michel Foucault's power theory, for example. When you apply it to this performance, you see exactly why things escalated so badly.
Foucault argued that power is a network structure. So when Abramović removed legal constraints and went totally passive, the audience's unchecked power naturally drifted straight toward violence. Without laws or social norms pushing back, people's repressed, extreme desires inevitably bubbled up to destroy her freedom.
You can also look at philosopher Giorgio Agamben's concept of homo succor, which perfectly captures this wildly uncomfortable dynamic. By stripping away her identity and rights, Abramović basically turned herself into a figure of bare life. The audience essentially became a sovereign entity. They were playing God, assigning value to her existence and quite literally deciding whether she lived or died. It really highlights a bizarre clash in human psychology. That written protocol, the contract where she took full responsibility, actually functioned like an unlocked door. It handed the audience formal written permission to just ditch their moral compass. The exact thing that made it art is what made it so incredibly dangerous. The invitation to participate turned into a literal license to abuse. Now, Abramović herself has said she didn't set out to make a strictly feminist piece, but you can't deny how the objectification of a female body by the public perfectly exposes the harsh realities of patriarchal dominance. She positioned herself as a vessel of desire and absorbed brutal exploitation. And it's so telling of the 1970s media landscape that they actually mocked her. A Serbian publication crassly joked that she wasn't too bad to look at and that someone could use her. The performance took the invisible, everyday threats women face and made them horrifyingly visible. The sources connect this right to the present day, too. Critics argue that Rhythm Zero serves as a devastating mirror reflecting the ongoing threat of violence women face, especially from people in positions of power. Modern analysis points out that whether you're looking at high-profile abuse allegations or staggering statistics about police officers under investigation for domestic violence, that core dynamic from Rhythm Zero, the abuse of vulnerable bodies by those who have been granted power and immunity, is absolutely still with us. And that brings us to the ultimate question. I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought from our explainer today. It's been 50 years since Marina Abramović stood motionless in that Naples gallery. Has human nature actually evolved since 1974? Think about it. If those exact same 72 objects were laid out on a table today and all laws were suspended for 6 hours, are we better now? Or are we just as capable of the unthinkable?